All right, so good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today at our next Friday installment of the First Year Experience Social Hour. We're happy to have our guest today, Dana Russo, who is joining us from the Student Personal Counseling Center right here on campus. And Dana is actually going to share with us some really great tools that we can have when you're learning to cope with various situations that may arise. And she's here to answer any of your questions that you may have on mental wellness. And as always, we are very grateful to have you joining us today. This is an excellent presentation, and I'm happy that we can record it and share it with those who couldn't join us today. So thank you, Dana.
Well, thank you for having me, and welcome to everyone who is attending. I appreciate you joining us for this very important topic, as Professor Cutter has mentioned. We will be going over how to build your self-care toolkit, right? So everyone has a self-care toolkit that they utilize. The goal of this workshop is that once we discuss different coping strategies to enhance your self-care, you can walk away with something that you can implement in your life. As mentioned, my name is Dana Russo. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I go by the pronouns of she and her. Again, just to go over our agenda for today's session, I'm going to give you information about the Student Personal Counseling Center, which is a resource available to all Malloy students. We'll define stress and what stress might look like for you, talk about different stressors as a first-year student. Then we're going to define self-care. What does self-care mean for you and to the counseling center? And by the end of the session, we'll practice. There's 7 different coping skills that we utilize in the counseling center. And again, the goal is that you leave here with a new or an interesting coping skill that you can practice outside in your lives. A little bit about the Student Personal Counseling Center. You may have recognized we go by the acronym of SPCC, or Student Personal Counseling Center. We are a free resource on campus, so you don't have to pay for any of our services, whether it's individual counseling, couples counseling, wellness workshops, trainings, crisis interventions, referrals, or events. We are confidential. So as a reminder, or if you're not familiar with HIPAA compliance, confidentiality, I like to use that expression, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So whatever you share in a counseling session with one of the counselors on campus is confidential, and we cannot report that outside of a counseling session. Therefore, let's say one of your professors sees that you're going through something and your mental health is being affected, and they recommend you to come to seek counseling. We can't even tell them whether you scheduled that counseling appointment or not. Okay, so we are confidential, and therefore we do not go on your academic records. Or if a parent or a peer member were to ask us if you are engaged in counseling, we cannot share that information. Does anyone want to guess? There are 2 times where a counselor has to breach confidentiality and report something that you share in session. I'm going to ask if anyone wants to take any guesses as to what one of those 2 instances are. Go ahead.
If somebody's going to hurt themselves.
Yep. So if we suspect an instance of safety for yourself or others. So there's a difference between hurting yourself through self-harm without the intent to kill yourself, right? We know there's something as far as non-injurious suicidal behavior. Sometimes cutting means that someone wants to feel an emotion instead of kill themselves. So if we suspect imminent danger as far as wanting to kill yourself or kill someone else in that moment, that's something that we have to report. There's one other instance where we have to breach confidentiality. And again, you could put it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself, but does anyone want to guess what this other situation is?
I'll take a guess.
Sure.
If you're going to hurt someone else.
Yeah. So if you're going to harm yourself or others we kind of lump that into one of the times we have to breach confidentiality, right? One of the guesses that I get a lot of times when I go to presentations is I have to report if I'm doing something or you're doing something illegal, right? Which is actually not true. If you
Isn't-
share, go ahead, Professor.
Isn't it like a Title IX, if there's like some sort of Title IX
Yeah,
mandatory reporting situation?
sure. So there's a difference between Title IX and being a mandated reporter, where if you were to share sexual assault to someone outside of the counseling center that's not confidential, they would have to report that to Lisa Miller, the Title IX coordinator. The only time that something constitutes as a Title IX that I would have to breach confidentiality is if you tell me there was sexual assault or domestic abuse to a minor, someone under the age of 18, or to someone who physically can't take care of themselves. Okay. I do get a lot of times you have to report if someone is doing something illegally, right? But that's not true. So if you share an instance of drinking alcohol under the age of 21 or doing drugs, I cannot report that. Or if you share an instance of something that you just shoplifted from the store, I cannot report that either. Right, so I really want to hone in on, we are confidential except for the self-harm to yourself or others, or the instance of sexual or domestic abuse to a minor or to an elder, someone who can't take care of themselves. A little bit more about the Student Personal Counseling Center. I know we just got into like a deep conversation right off the bat, but we do provide teletherapy appointments as well as in-person appointments. Okay, so if you want to meet with someone face-to-face for a counseling appointment, there are 3 counselors on campus. There's myself, who's a licensed mental health counselor, Talita, the director of the counseling center, who's also a licensed mental health counselor, and Kathy, who's a licensed clinical social worker. We also have 2 interns in training. One is from this Fordham Malloy social work program, and another one is from the mental health counseling program at Malloy, both in their graduate degrees. We have a Zoom platform that is confidential as well, so it follows the HIPAA compliance guidelines on our end. We have walk-in hours, so if you don't have a scheduled appointment and you are in need of talking to a counselor during that day, every single day, Monday through Friday from 12:30 to 1:30, we don't schedule an appointment on someone's schedule, so you can sit and meet with a counselor for a brief check-in appointment. Typically, those appointments are about 15 to 20 minutes, and then you can schedule an appointment after that. We operate on a single session model, which means we don't cap the number of sessions that you can be seen. So we could be seen for all 4 years that you're on campus, or you might come in for one session and feel like you got something out of that session from that counselor, that you don't want to get re-engaged in counseling because what you were coming in for, your needs were met. We're located in Public Square. We're located in the garden level, we like to call it. So it's not the basement, it's the garden level. If you go down the elevator in Public Square and you follow the blue wall, that is where our office is. It's room 30. Our phone number to contact the Student Personal Counseling Center is 516-323-3484. And again, we do individual, couples, groups, wellness workshops, trainings, crisis event interventions, referrals, and events. One piece of information I always like to highlight is the term couples counseling. Usually when I say couples counseling, people think that you have to be in a romantic relationship with someone in order to engage in couples counseling. But I want you to think of couples counseling as 2 people. This means that we can do roommate conflict. So if you're living with a roommate and you are not getting along with your roommate and you want to work on setting boundaries or healthy communication with your roommate, that's considered couples counseling. Or if you are doing a group project and your partner, you're just not getting along with your partner, or you're not seeing eye to eye with your partner, you can come to counseling and we can help you with that as well. Okay, the only caveat to that is that you both have to be Malloy students in order to engage in counseling with us. Okay. We also have Lucy. Lucy is our pet assisted therapy dog. Lucy is Talita's dog who was certified in pet assisted therapy. So she went through an intensive training to get her certification in order to pick up on when students are in distress. Okay, so she can pick up on that. And we know that pet therapy can be very therapeutic just by having a pet in our space and to be able to pet Lucy or cuddle with Lucy or just interact with Lucy. She's a great dog. She has office hours, so she is on campus on Thursdays at 3:30. One of the wellness workshops we host is called Thrive. So it helps students to strive to thrive throughout the semester. And Lucy attends those workshops on Thursdays at 3:30, located in Public Square, room 50. Okay. If anybody has any questions at any time, please feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat. So stress, let's talk about stress. Show of hands, you can use the, I don't know what they're called, the emojis or the reactions. How many people are feeling like this? I know we're about halfway through the semester now. Maybe we're dealing with some midterms, some presentations, a lot of assignments. Yep, I see a couple of hands. I know I'm dealing with some stress right now as well. Right? This is normal. This is expected this time of the semester. It's really expected anytime throughout the semester. The beginning of the semester, when we're working through that transition period, just getting used to our professors, maybe being a first-year student, getting used to the transition from high school to college, getting used to the campus itself, getting used to roommates, getting used to that independence. Stress is definitely a normal experience that students are going to experience. So what is stress? Any definitions of what we think stress might be? Anyone want to take a guess? All right. Well, Psychology Today says stress is the psychological perception of pressure and the body's response to it. So there's a mind-body connection that we have going on. Okay. So what this means is that our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, and attitudes can either positively or negatively affect our biological functioning. Or in other words, our minds can affect how healthy or unhealthy our bodies are. On the other hand, what we do with our bodies, what we put into our bodies in terms of what we eat, how much we're exercising, even our posture, this can impact our mental state, again, either in a positive or negative direction. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to take your phones out. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up this other little activity here. I'm going to ask you to text Dana White in all caps 912 to the number 37607. So if you see it's right here, you're going to text Dana White 912 to 37607. So what this is going to do, I'm going to ask that after you text, you're going to join this poll everywhere. And once you join, you're going to be able to input what you think stressors that first year students may face, right? And it's going to come up anonymously. So if I show you, I'm hoping this is going to work. Let's see. All right, so I just inputted anxiety as something. And you can add as many or as little as you want. But what do you think some stressors are that first year students face? I'll give us a few minutes to enter some things. I see anxiety, tests, making friends, depression, time management, homesickness, loneliness. Yep, these are some good ones. Commuting, yep, definitely a stressor. Long Island traffic, right? Especially if we're commuting. Finances, good one. Gonna give it about 30 more seconds. See if I could see money. Yep. Awesome. Let me bring my PowerPoint. So when we talk about stress, I always like to use the analogy of the game of Jenga. Anyone want to explain how the game of Jenga works? If we've ever played Jenga before? All right, you're really making a counselor work. Someone who doesn't do a lot of talking. I do more of the listening. You're really making me work here, everyone. So Jenga, if we've ever played Jenga before, or if we haven't played Jenga before, what we know about the game of Jenga, or as I could explain the game of Jenga, is each block is stacked on top of each other in perpendicular kind of fashion. So they crisscross each other. And what happens is you pull a piece of Jenga out. And if you're able to successfully pull a piece of Jenga out, the way I play it is you put it on top. If you don't successfully pull a piece of Jenga out, what typically happens? The game is going to fall down and the game is over, right? So I always like to use Jenga as an analogy for how we deal with stress. Each piece of Jenga is going to represent one of those stressors that we just identified, right? Which makes up a person's life. We're either going to experience these stressors all at one time, or we're going to experience them one piece at a time, right? Every time that we deal with a stressor, that's going to resemble when we pull a piece out of the game. If we're able to successfully cope with that stress, we're going to put the piece on top, just like in the game, and we grow from that stressor because of using positive coping skills. Let's say that we deal with a stressor and we pull it out of the piece and we aren't able to cope with that stress, or we use negative coping skills, such as maybe drinking or drugs or aggression. That's when life becomes overwhelming and we're not able to successfully grow from that situation, but we kind of crumble, or maybe we feel overwhelmed or too much pressure in that moment. Okay. Anybody have Sour Patch Kids before? Yeah, or Warheads? Those sweet candies. I think I added this because Halloween was coming up and I'm really in the mood for some candy right now. If everyone could just mute them, thank you. So I like to also talk about or use the analogy of Sour Patch Kids or Warheads when we discuss some of those perceived negative emotions that we experience, such as the stress, such as feelings of overwhelmedness, such as sadness, such as depression, right? And if you know anything about Sour Patch Kids, you know that the slogan is first they're sour, then they're sweet. right? So you have that moment of first putting that Sour Patch Kid in your mouth and kind of getting like that sour face because of the tartness that happens, right? But after a while, once you're eating that piece of candy, you realize that they become a very sweet candy that you can kind of eat regularly, right? I love this analogy because I think this is very similar to how we experience those perceived negative emotions, right? These emotions are temporary emotions. They're not permanent. So when we're dealing with stress, stress is not a permanent emotion that we're always going to experience every single moment of our life, right? It's a matter of how we're able to cope with that stress. I'm all for analogies and pictures, right? So I always love to explain our life like a roller coaster, where the top point of the roller coaster is those what we perceive positive emotions, such as the happiness, right? And the lower part of the roller coaster or the dips of the roller coaster are what we perceive as those negative emotions. We have to go through various emotions, the highs and the lows, in order to experience that other emotion more. Because if we were only to experience happiness, we would never know what sadness feels like. Or if we never experienced sadness, we really wouldn't know what happiness feels like because we would be on like a flat plane. Any questions so far? Okay, the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about different coping skills that we utilize in the counseling center in order to cope with some of these perceived negative emotions. The first one we talk about is self-care, right? So what is self-care? It's choosing to create a life that you don't feel the need to regularly check out of. It's anything you do to keep yourself healthy, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And it's taking responsibility of taking care of you. Right? A lot of the majors on campus, we're taking care of a lot of other people. So I always love to point out that we're not able to take care of other people until we take care of ourselves. Anytime I talk of self-care, I always mention how typically we associate self-care with our hobbies that we do, right? Getting our nails done, taking a bubble bath, going for a run, exercising, taking a nap. And these are all things that are self-care. But I do want to throw a disclaimer out there that self-care, what self-care is for me might not be self-care for you. So one thing I know about Professor Cutter is that Professor Cutter loves to run, right? Are we still a runner?
Yes, we are.
All right. So if Professor Cutter would have asked me to go on a run with her in order to engage in self-care, I would look at her like she has 10 heads because I absolutely hate running. And running actually causes me more stress, right? So when we talk about self-care, it's important to remember any of these coping skills or any self-care that we talk about might not necessarily work for you. The goal is to find something that is helpful for you and that does work for you. Okay. When we also talk about self-care, we talk about adding things to our life typically. Right? But we're all college students or college professors or faculty, and we know that our lives are pretty busy, right? So we don't want to stress ourselves out more by having to add things to our already crazy schedules. So this is just an example of what self-care can look like, right? Forgiving yourself, taking a step back, asking for help, spending time alone or putting yourself first, asking for what you need, setting boundaries, staying at home, and saying no. I like to highlight the saying no one, because I think this is one that students or a lot of people have difficulty doing because they don't want to put anyone down or they don't want to reject anyone. Right? But I think what's important to remember is that when we say no to something or someone, what we're really doing is saying yes to ourselves. Right? For example, if one of my friends were to ask me to go to a Halloween party tomorrow night, but I have to study for a test on Monday, maybe I am saying no to that Halloween party, But what I'm really doing is I'm saying yes to myself to be able to give myself time to study. What we're doing in that moment is we're reframing the way that we're looking at things, which brings us to our next coping skill, reframing. Right? So when an event happens, what you think about the event will affect how you feel about the event. So we use the ABC model when we're looking at different situations and we're trying to reframe our mindsets. If we look at the A is going to be your activating events. The B in the situation is going to be your beliefs. So A is the activating event. It's the situation or something that happens to you in the environment around you. The B is your beliefs or your thoughts surrounding that event. You have a belief or an interpretation regarding the activating events. And C is your consequences, right? Those are your emotions or your feelings and behaviors about the event. So I'll give you an example. An example is, I joked around about Long Island traffic. As a commuter student, we all know that Long Island traffic can be very stressful. But I want you to picture you're driving on, let's say, Southern State, and a car cuts you off, right? So the activating event is that the car cuts you off. What might your belief be about that activating event? Or your thought patterns about the person who cut you off?
That they're a jerk.
That they're a jerk, right? That they're an asshole for cutting me off?
Mm-hmm.
That they almost could have hit me?
Yep.
Right? I'm probably gonna be, my consequences, I'm probably gonna be really pissed off or frustrated with that person, right? I might flip them the finger and honk on my horn really hard. I'm gonna be probably mad at them, right? But what this chart says and what the reframing aspect is if we look into our beliefs and we change what we think about that situation, our emotions are gonna change. What are some ways I could change my beliefs about that situation? Instead of thinking that person's a jerk, what is a way I can reframe my thinking?
They're in a rush. They have to
They're
be
in a rush?
someplace important.
Yeah, so maybe they're in a rush and they have to be someplace important. Right? So then if that's my belief, what might my consequence be or my emotion be? I might be a little more at ease, or might think, okay, they have to get somewhere more quicker than I do. So I might be a little indifferent instead of angry. Another belief could be, and this is a drastic belief, but I could think that I'm lucky I'm in a car and I don't have to walk to where I have to be. Right? So if I shift my thinking and I reframe my thinking from, wow, this person is an idiot, and I reframe it to think, I'm lucky I'm in a car. I'm grateful I'm in a car and not walking or taking a bike today. My consequence or my emotion might be more gratitude than anger. Anyone have any questions so far? All right, let's go on to our next coping skill, grounding. Right, so grounding is not only to have your feet on the ground, but also meaning to have your mind on the ground as well. We talk about mindfulness in the counseling center, right? What mindfulness is not necessarily yoga, because that's what a lot of people associate mindfulness with, but mindfulness is being in that present moment, the here and now, right? So when I talk about mindfulness with my students, I always talk about it with like that anxiety and depression, because typically anxiety is future-oriented thought patterns, those what-if conversations that we have with ourselves. For example, test anxiety. Typically what that looks like is, what if I fail this test, right? What if I don't get a passing score? Something that is happening in the future that is outside of our control. On the other hand, depression or sadness is past-oriented events, right? Why didn't I study harder to get a better grade? Why didn't I talk to that person and make a friend when I went to that club? So what we're doing is our thought patterns are going too far into the future or too far into the past, and we don't have control over something that's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year. Or we don't have control over something that happened a year ago or last week or yesterday. So mindfulness is really being in that present moment and the here and now. One way we can do that is through grounding. So a simple exercise that we discuss in the counseling center is called sensory grounding. Right? So it's using our 5 senses, something that we do day to day, such as the see, feel, hear, smell, and taste. And we do them in a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 approach. So when I'm in my classroom and I'm thinking about my test that's going on in a half hour, I can bring myself to the present moment by using tangible things around me in order to ground myself. So I want to give you a few minutes just to do this exercise right now. I want you to look around the room and ground yourself by identifying 5 things you can see. Once you're able to identify 5 things you can see, you'll go to 5 things you can feel. So you're really grounding yourself to tangible things that you can actually feel. Maybe this is the sweater on your body, or the floor under your feet, or the chair up against your back. Once you identify 4 things you can feel, you'll move on to 3 things you can hear. And what I typically notice is I'm now paying attention to things that I typically don't hear. So not only am I listening and hearing my voice, but when I'm paying attention, now I'm listening to my computer screen that's making that little buzz sound that I'm typically not listening to, right? Or I'm listening to Kathy outside of my office on the phone right now, which I typically block out, but I'm being more present and paying attention to that. Once you identify 3 things you could hear, we move on to 2 things you could smell. Right, so maybe I'm smelling the coffee on my breath from this morning, or I'm able to smell the pizza that was left over from yesterday's event. And then the last thing is 1 thing that you can taste. Right, so what this is doing is this is bringing us to the here and the now, our surrounding environment. Another simple exercise that we could do in order to ground ourselves is think of our favorite color. Right, so you'll notice that I chose a blue background because that's one of our favorite colors in the counseling center because it's very calming. Right, so if blue is going to be my color that I choose, what I can do is I can look around my room and identify every single thing that I see that's blue. Okay. Another exercise that we talk about in the counseling center is deep breathing. And I love this exercise so much because breathing is something that every single person does. But sometimes we just take advantage of it because we don't recognize that we're breathing and it could be beneficial for us. So we're going to take a few minutes to practice some deep breathing. This is called box breathing that we're going to be doing. What I like to do when I focus on my breathing is I like to get into a comfortable position. I take one of my hands and I put it on my chest. And my other hand I like to put on my stomach. And for those of us who might not know the proper way of breathing, when we breathe in, we want to breathe in through our nose, and we want to feel our stomach and our chest kind of raise up, because what we're doing is we're filling our lungs and our stomach up with air. When we breathe out, what we want to do is we want to breathe out through our mouth, and that's when our stomach and our chest is going to fold into our bodies because all of the oxygen is going to come out of us. Right, so this is a quick deep breathing exercise. Notice it's a box that we're breathing and not a square because I like to keep the same amount of time for each inhale, each hold, and each exhale. Okay, and it's deep breathing, right? So it's not a quick type of breathing. Otherwise, we would be breathing and we would be almost like hyperventilating, where it would look like right? So we're doing deep breathing because we're really being intentional with taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out. So feel free to get in a comfortable position. Put your hand over your chest, your hand over your stomach. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. And let's see if this works. All right. Hopefully no one went to sleep on that one. Excuse me. I think something that's really important when we focus on our breathing or when we do anything with mindfulness is sometimes students often say that it's very difficult for them to do because of all the thoughts that are going through their head. Right? But I think that's something that we don't want to shy away from. I think we want to acknowledge those thoughts and see if we can pass them through our brain by recentering ourselves and refocusing on our breathing. Excuse me. Another coping skill that we talk about in the counseling center is time management. I saw that time management was one of the ones that we talked about as being stressful. So some advice or techniques that we give you for time management is be mindful of the time needed for each subject that you're putting time into, right? Generally dictate about 2 hours of study time for each class or each subject. Remember your deadlines by using a calendar or using your phone and or your whiteboard if you have one in your room. Right? Creating to-do lists, using an agenda. I know Student Affairs always gives out free agendas at the beginning of the semester because just by writing things down, you're more likely to accomplish that than if you were to just internally tell yourself, oh yeah, I'll study tomorrow or I'll write my paper tomorrow. Also remember to take breaks when you're studying for a big exam, right? So writing down a paper or working on a project. Make sure you're taking breaks though, and reward yourself for things. So reward yourself each time that you study 2 hours. Reward yourself no matter how you do on your assignment or your test. Excuse me. The same way we talked about getting to know yourself on how coping skills are going to be useful for you, get to know yourself as a student, right? How are you absorbing new information? Are you someone who's a visual learner where you need to see things? Or are you someone who's an auditory learner where you need to record the lectures or record yourself teaching something and listen to it throughout the day? Do you like to rewrite your notes, or do you like to use Quizlets or flashcards or studying with others? Right? Also know yourself what time of day you enjoy learning or doing assignments. Are you a morning learner, or are you more of a night owl learner? Another coping skill we discuss is goal setting, right? So setting small goals that are SMART goals. We use this acronym SMART all the time in the counseling center when discussing goals. We want to make sure that our goals are specific, right? So state exactly what you want to do by using action words. Make sure they're measurable, so provide a way to evaluate them. Instead of saying, I want to get a good grade in this class, what does a good grade mean to you? Is that a 4.0 or is it a 2.5? Right? Use metrics or data targets. Make sure your goals are achievable, right? So I hear this one sometimes when people talk about wanting to set goals that are losing weight, where they say, oh, I want to lose 100 pounds by next week, right? Make sure it's something that you're going to actually be able to achieve, right? Within your scope. So maybe you're not a 4.0 student, but maybe you're a 3.0 student. So make sure you are able to achieve that goal. Make sure they're relevant, so make sense within your job function, right? If I'm in graduate school for mental health counseling, I'm not going to want to make a goal that I'm going to find the new cure for cancer. Right? I want to make sure that I'm doing something relevant to my work or to my major or to my degree or to my specific goal. And I want to make sure there's a time bound for my goal. So I want to make sure that I'm hitting a deadline so that I know when my goal needs to be reached. So I'll specifically state I want to run a marathon by next summer. Okay, and be specific on the date or time frame. And I believe the last coping skill that I wanted to discuss was, again, reframing, right? But reframing in a positive self-talk. So a lot of times as humans, we have negative self-talk, right? I'm going to fail this test. I'm not going to do well. I didn't study enough, right? So again, reframing is changing our thought patterns. So if we typically tell ourselves, I will fail this test, one way to change this statement is, I will pass this test, or I have studied hard enough that I know I can do well, right? Or I have studied hard enough that I know I can get an 80 on this test, right? I always do bad on the tests, right? If that's my negative thought pattern, I want to kind of challenge that and reframe that thinking, because we're all in college, so we must have passed tests during high school in order to get into the college level, right? So challenge that negative thought pattern and reframe it to, I've passed tests before. I can pass this test. I'm capable of passing this test, right? I can't handle this, to I have the capability to handle this. I have handled a situation similar to this before, so I can handle this too. Anybody have any questions? I want to open it up to any questions about any of the coping skills that we discussed.
I have a question, and I'll be mindful of time too, because I
Sure.
know we're close to the hour here. So I'm thinking about the ABC method, and thinking about like something that I go over in class with my students, and I find that it's hard to kind of change the so that first activating event, it's hard to kind of change that like how you're going to perceive that situation. I feel like is so wired in our brains, and
Yes.
I'm having a hard time kind of moving past those activating events and changing that so that your initial thought is, with the car, like anger.
Yes.
And so I was just wondering if you have any advice to kind of move past when an activating event automatically triggers a negative thought or an angry thought.
Absolutely. That's a really good question, right? I think that goes to getting to know yourself and what your triggers are, right? So if I know that I get angry because someone else is doing something to me, I want to identify what is that trigger? What is triggering me to become angry, right? So now I could be aware of, okay, this is situations that trigger me. Or I want to become aware of when I start to feel angry, maybe I start to feel my heart racing a little bit. Or maybe I start to feel myself clenching my fists a little bit. If I can identify that, or I can identify triggers, I'm able to start the reframing, or I'm able to implement deep breathing in that situation to say, okay, this is something that's getting me angry. I can acknowledge my anger. I'm angry because of this situation, but let me reframe it before I become so angry that I'm now becoming affected by my anger. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a lot of test anxiety in students
Sure.
lately, and like almost to the panic stage. And I'm really trying to like get to it before it gets to that level. So just some of those grounding techniques I think are really important.
Yeah.
Just college is stressful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why this is such a great topic that you're bringing to the students as well. But for them to identify, okay, if test anxiety or testing is something that's going to increase my anxiety, where is that anxiety started? And how can I use those coping skills at the starting point before it gets to the point where I can't even physically take a test? Any other questions?
Feel free to use the chat as well if you don't want to unmute.
Dana,
Yes.
where can the students locate you? Where are you located?
Yeah.
And how can they get in contact with the Student Personal Counseling Center? And if there is, if they really have to contact you right away, if there's an emergency, who should they get in contact with?
Great question. It's like you knew what my next slide was.
All right.
Right, so we have a QR code. So if anyone wants to go more in depth on any of these coping skills or any stressor or perceived negative emotion that they're dealing with, you can scan this QR code actually right now, and it will bring you to an online appointment request. You will fill out just a brief information about yourself, pretty much your name, your date of birth, your phone number, your email address, and your availability. And someone from the counseling center will contact you in order to schedule an appointment to meet with a counselor. So that's one way you can schedule an appointment. Another way you can schedule an appointment is stopping by our office. We're located in Public Square, room 30. So again, in the lower level of Public Square, as soon as you come off the elevator or the stairs and you follow the blue wall, that's where our office is. Or you can call us, and I'll put our number in the chat again, or at 516-323-3484 in order to schedule an appointment. Okay. Again, if you're in a crisis and you need to speak to a counselor that day, we have those walk-in hours. So walk-in hours are from 12:30 to 1:30. I'm going to put that in the chat as well, where a counselor does not have a scheduled appointment and you can meet with a counselor that day. Okay. Disclosure, we are closed on the weekends. We do follow the university's openings. So we are closed during holidays and weekends, but we do have evening appointments available as well as morning appointments available. So we are open Monday through Friday as early as 8:45. Monday through Thursday as early as 8:45, and on Fridays we're open as early as 8 a.m. And then Monday and Wednesdays we close as late as 7 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays we close at 6 p.m. and Fridays at 5 p.m. So we do have extended hours as well.
Dana,
Yes.
if a student is having suicidal thoughts or knows of another student that's having suicidal thoughts, or thoughts of self-harm. What
Yeah.
is your suggestion?
Great question. So if you are in imminent danger, meaning you are having suicidal thoughts in this moment, not suicidal thoughts a week, a month ago, a year ago, if you're having suicidal thoughts in this moment, and it's someone that you know is having suicidal thoughts, what we're asking you to do is ask them the suicide question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Right? Are you having thoughts of killing yourself? If the answer is yes, we're asking you to call public safety if you're on Malloy's Rockville Center campus in order for a counselor to do a further assessment of that student or yourself. If you're off Malloy's Rockville Center campus, if you're on the Suffolk campus, if you're at your house, if you're at a party, and a person says yes, we're asking you to contact 911. If the person says no, they're not having thoughts of suicide imminently, or in that moment, we're asking you to do a referral to the counseling center. So this would sound like something as far as, did you know the counseling center was free and confidential? Did you know you can see a counselor on campus and talk about what you're going through? If they answer no to the question of wanting to kill themselves or suicide. Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for attending. I hope that you took away a coping skill that you can utilize throughout your time at Malloy and after Malloy. And if you would like to go further in depth with coping skills, please contact us to schedule an appointment.
We do have one giveaway, right? Deb?
Yes.
One giveaway with books. So do we have numbers or what do we want to, how do we want to do it, Deb?
Yeah, we have a swag giveaway from the Student Personal Counseling Center. So if everybody would like to put their name in the chat, and then we'll ask Dr. Cutter to pick a number from 1 through 10.
I think there's only 7.
How many students?
7,
9.
right? Yeah, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because we make up a big group. Yeah, myself, Dana, you, and Tina. Yeah. Oh, or maybe they're not really here anymore.
What building is the Student Personal Counseling Center located in?
Public Square.
Public Square.
Put that in the chat. Public Square,
Yeah.
room 30.
What floor?
Garden
The
level.
Garden level, room 30. Or the basement, but I think the basement sounds like dingy. So we call it the garden level. We reframe our conversation about the basement.
Okay, I like that garden level.
Yes.
It sounds pretty, very pretty, garden level.
It sounds inviting.
Inviting.
It is inviting, especially when the
Yes.
therapy dog is there.
Yes.
You know what? That could be our next raffle question. What's the name of the therapy dog?
Yes.
If the first student that puts that in the chat can get the raffle prize.
Yeah. I'm only seeing a couple of responses here. So I have 3 students in the running at the moment. And only because I'm rushing just because I have a 3 o'clock Zoom I need to host. So so Lucy, yes, agree. Frank, do you
Oh,
want to be?
all right,
Sort of
Frank. Is Frank a student?
I believe he is. Yes, but I don't think
Alright.
I don't think they knew that we were really asking. And I think I might have said Lucy as well out loud.
All right.
But how many students responded to being part? We've got 4, right?
4. Okay.
All
1,
right.
2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Anybody
Well,
else want to put their name in the chat?
Deborah, what I could do, I could create 4 packages for the students that enter.
Oh,
Oh,
That's
that's
so
so
sweet.
nice.
Thank you.
And then if you want to grab that for all 4 students.
Okay, that's
Excellent.
great. That's great. So we have Gabriella, Sasha, Marie, and Frank.
And so you can come to Sienna 106, just give us maybe Wednesday or Thursday of next week, and we'll make sure that those bags are ready for you. Just let them know that you won the first year experience social hour raffle or giveaway, swag giveaway. I'm going to close our meeting because I have to jump on another one.
Thank
but
you.
Thank you, Dana. That was incredibly useful. And we really appreciate your time sharing your information with us. And hopefully it was very useful for our students.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Always a pleasure to host you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a happy, safe weekend. Have a happy Halloween. I hope you get some festivities in. And if you have any leftover candy, I'm very grateful to receive it. Enjoy the weather and join us next Friday, 2 to 3, where we host our next speaker. Good
Thank
evening,
you, Dr.
everyone.
Cutter.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dana.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good
You too.
weekend.
Have a great weekend, everyone.